Hello and welcome. I'm Amy Allen. I'm the Managing Director and Founder of Senploy. The goal of the Senploy Spotlight Sessions is to shed some light on the incredible work being done in the field of special educational needs and disabilities, and to generate some thought-provoking conversation and discussion around various aspects of the SEND sector. We'll be sharing successes, discussing the challenges, and looking at the positive developments in this expansive landscape. We've selected individuals to join the Spotlight Sessions who are not only experts in their field, but they're trailblazers, advocates, and dedicated educators who, through their work, are directly and indirectly affecting and positively impacting the lives of children and young people. I really hope you enjoy the Senploy Spotlight Sessions. In this Spotlight session, I'm speaking with the esteemed Abigail Hawkins from Sensible SENCO and SENCO Solutions. Abigail's a bit of an expert when it comes to all things SEND. She's dedicated her career to supporting the constantly evolving and complex landscape that is special educational needs and disabilities. So join us in this deep dive into the purple world of Abigail and all things SEND. Great to have you here today, Abigail. Welcome. Can we start by you introducing yourself and sharing a bit about your journey to becoming a SENCO and to the position that you're in today?
We can try. I'm not wearing purple. I'm sorry. I missed that bit on the remit.
I did say to the PR company, Abigail is the purple lady.
I am.
So
and even the hair's
we can edit some in.
Even the hair's not purple. Okay, so where did my career start? I trained as a teacher back in the 1990s, so last century, which makes me feel very, very old now. And I originally trained as a science teacher for secondary, and I thought this will be great, this will be fun. And I ended up working in a school in the outskirts of London. It was actually East End of London that somebody had picked up and dumped in the middle of a green field. So kind of describes it quite aptly, to be fair. And lots of children there with needs. Yeah. So I honed my experience, I suppose. And I just happened to start teaching the year that the original code of practice was brought in for SEN. So everybody was cutting their teeth on something new. I moved from there to another school up in Staffordshire, and again, the person who had been put in the role of SENCO kind of went off ill, and I ended up picking up her role without having the title, which was great. And then I moved from there to a primary school because I thought that was a really good idea, except they gave me the nursery class and they touch you and it's scary. So I thought I can't stand that for much longer. But again, I ended up with the SENCO role. I moved to
a natural theme here.
There's a bit of a theme going on. I didn't have the title, but I ended up with the role. Moved from there to a FE because the little ones scared me, so I thought I'll try the big ones instead. Yeah. And lo and behold, I ended up with the SEN cohort. So I thought, okay, in that case, I think I'd better apply for a role as a SENCO. So I applied for a role as a SENCO and ended up in a secondary school, which is kind of where I started my career. And that's what I did. So I've taught every age range from 2 to 19, and I now teach adults. And I have ended up doing the SEN role, with or without the title, all the way through. Okay. But also picked up other titles on the way. So because the SENCO never does just SENCO. We end up covering EAL and pupil premium and looked after and safeguarding and first aid and all of these things that nobody else wants in school. Yeah. So you have a head teacher who, they pick up toileting and plumbing and things that they never thought they were going to do. As a SENCO, you end up picking up lots of things you didn't think you were going to do. Yeah,
so it makes you a jack of all trades,
absolutely,
master of none in particular, but you do pretty well under that umbrella of SEN. But I think in that we've talked about lots and lots of acronyms in there. Can we really clarify? Is it SENCO? Is it SENDCO? And what does the SENCO actually do?
Okay, so it is SENCO without the D,
okay,
because that is what we are legally called in the CAFA, which is the Children's and Families Act from 2014.
Okay.
That translates then into the SEND code of practice. The D comes from the disability bit. It doesn't really matter what you call yourself. I mean, you might as well call me Jack of all trades, to be honest. That suits me. Mrs. Hawkins is probably better. But SENCO, SENDCO, it's the same job, really. Okay. Some people just like to put the D in there. Some of us don't bother.
So it's used interchangeably and no one's going to be offended if we get that one wrong. Okay. And in a school, what does the SENCO do?
anything and everything. No. So we look after the children who have needs that go beyond what the classroom teacher can meet. So we talk about reasonable adjustments in classrooms. Those are things like grabbing a coloured overlay or giving you a different barrel thickness for your pencil to support you with your writing. They're reasonable adjustments. They don't particularly cost us a lot of money. It's not involving an additional adult. It's just putting something in place.
Okay.
When a child needs more than that, that's when somebody has to come in and give advice. And we are the person that gives that advice. We coordinate, and this is where SENCOs sometimes struggle. We don't do, we coordinate.
Okay.
We coordinate the provision. We coordinate putting an additional member of staff in there, or identifying a provision or an intervention that somebody needs to do to support that child to help them make progress. Just because a child has a diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean they belong on the SEN register, because like I say, dyslexia very often, coloured overlay, chunking the information, breaking it down, scaffolding. Teacher can do that as part of their normal teaching. Doesn't mean they need to go on the SEN register. Their needs are met and they make progress within the class.
Okay.
It's when they're not making progress, that's when we have to do something different.
Okay, great. And am I right in thinking that every school legally has to have a SENCO within the school?
Maintained schools.
Maintained schools.
Independent schools, it's optional but best practice advice.
Okay.
But maintained schools in the UK, every school should have a SENCO, and if we're in Wales, they have an ALNCO, which is an additional learning needs coordinator.
Okay, and do most of them, independent schools, have a SENCO?
A lot of them have a SENCO. They have the person in role, but they don't necessarily hold the mandatory qualification that is required.
Right.
And there is a mandatory qualification required to be a SENCO. It's about to change. So at the moment, it's called the NASENCO, which is the National Award for Special Educational Needs Coordination. I have to think about that one. Too many letters. And that's a master's level qualification that says, I know what I'm doing, I'm able to do this, that they've had some training, that they know the legalities that sit behind it, because it's a very legally fraught role. Okay. And that takes usually 12 to 18 months for somebody to undertake and do that. Okay. And it has to be supported by their head teacher in school for them to undertake it. It's about to change. So the SEND reforms that are coming in, although they haven't gone through law at the moment of filming, but they may have done, that's going to bring in an NPQ, which is National Professional Qualification, which is on the same levels as the SLT ones and the head teacher ones and the rest of them. The issue at the moment is that the universities are having trouble kind of deciding what the content of that is going to be, and it won't be a master's level qualification.
Okay. So this is how we say it's constantly evolving.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is always moving. But you're doing a really good thing with the Sensible SENCO Facebook group and the network that you've created. I think at last look you had about 11,000 members in your community.
12,600.
I'm out of date, clearly. What's inspired you to create the Sensible SENCO network community, and how is it helping the people that are part of that?
Okay, so if we backtrack slightly to, I was in the secondary school, didn't have the best of head teachers. I was actually forced into a voluntary redundancy. So despite the fact that every school has to have a SENCO, my roles were disseminated amongst the senior leadership team. So therefore, somebody else took on the SEN side, and I was made redundant. And it was like, hold on, this is a bit frustrating. So I was actually doing some background work for an ed tech company, contacted them, said, if you hear of any jobs, can you let me know? They came back and said, come and be our consultant SENCO. So I thought, okay, I'll go and do that. But their director was really encouraging and said, you can set up your own business, go and do some consultancy work, you'd be great at it. Okay, fine.
Well, when you've got all this knowledge, you might as well use it, put it to good use.
It was, confidence had taken a bit of a battering though, okay. So it was like, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, but I'll go and try it. So I created a Facebook group because one of the things that really frustrated me when I was in role was I'd have a question. I want to know how to deal with little Freddie who's struggling with something. Yeah. There was nobody to ask in school because I'm supposed to be the expert. Okay. And if I wanted a local service, one of my traded services, I had to pay for it. Or I was having to email somebody and wait 2 or 3 weeks for a response. And I could see that in Facebook, you could ask a question, you can get pretty much instant responses. Yeah. And actually, the really nice thing about it is you get 5 or 6 different responses. So you've got something to choose from because nobody knows the context of your school. it's ever changing.
Yeah.
And what works in one school might not work in another. So I set the group up as a kind of virtual hug for everybody to go, come on, let's get together, let's share our knowledge and what's going on.
I like that.
And then COVID hit, lovely old COVID. And my membership of that group exploded because one of the big advantages I had was I had time to read the ever-evolving information that was coming out about what we had to do in our roles. So the risk assessments, whether we had to teach them or didn't have to teach them, whether they needed to be in school or out of school, what was happening. And that was coming out on a daily basis. But
no one really knew what the protocol was?
No.
Okay.
So I was taking that information on a daily basis, turning it into a set of bullet points, putting them on the Facebook group and saying, here you go, this is what it tells you you've got to do. Here's the link to that if you want to read more. But here's your summary. And that made the group kind of grow.
Okay.
Then they started saying, we're missing our contact with people. We've not got any networks going. So Sensible SENCO itself became more than just a Facebook group. It became a network group. And we started having online meetings. So we called them Wine and Wine. So you would come along on a Wednesday night with a glass of wine and have a good wine about things.
I will wait for my invite. Abigail.
It was wonderful. It was fantastic. And it just allowed everybody to kind of relax into it and share their frustrations and have somebody else come up with some potential solutions for them. And
just that feeling of, because COVID was quite an isolating time, and we will touch on COVID a little bit more later. So just removing that level of isolation for people was probably hugely important. And again, that confidence level for people to be able to access the information they needed probably really did a great thing. So well done. I think you've done a brilliant thing with the Sensible SENCO group. I'd like to move now on to talking about the challenges that are in SEND at the moment, or special educational needs and disabilities. So we've said that it's a constant evolution of change in our sector, and this constant challenge. And I think the SEND and AP improvement plan that was set out in March was completely full of promise. I think it was 33 new special schools, investment in training for workers so that they can deal better with the children, young people with SEN. Is it realistic?
It's realistic if they actually put real money behind it and stop pulling the money from one pot to put it into another pot.
Okay.
Because there's these wonderful quotes in there about how much money they're going to give to it.
Yeah.
But I think what perhaps general Joe public doesn't realise is, yes, that money is going to appear in that pot, but they've just pulled it out of the other pots that go into school. So there's no additional funding, it's just moved funding and moving those priorities. Some of it is realistic. I mean, those free schools are starting to happen. I spoke with a trust earlier this week. They've got the go-ahead for 2 free schools, which are free special schools. So that's happening. Teacher training, jury's out.
Should we move swiftly on?
Yeah, let's move very swiftly on. I mean, it'd be great to see it happening.
It would be great.
But I think that's a massive culture change, and somebody who will always have a greater priority.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, looking at the staffing and employment side of it, where are we going to get all these people from to fill these 33 new schools when the schools that are out there at the moment don't have sufficient resource? But as we say, let's leave it there because we can't solve that problem today. What would you say is the biggest challenge that we're facing in SEND at the moment?
I think it's demand. So we have a lot of parent demand. We have a lot of staff demand. I think everybody's resilience over the last few years has reduced. So what we used to cope with in a classroom, we now don't cope with quite as well. And perhaps staff are feeling a little bit overwhelmed because there's a lot going on for teaching staff in schools, which is why they're quitting in droves. And we've got parents who are more aware of what their rights are, which is good. But it's also coming with a massive demand of resource that goes with that. And unfortunately, instead of understanding what we said earlier about, we can meet some needs within the classroom with an overlay or a different pencil or just changing the way that we teach slightly, a lot of people just assume that SEN means I can have an extra adult and I can have one-to-one tutoring. That's not what it is at all, and it really shouldn't ever be that. And that's where most schools are struggling.
Okay.
So we can't recruit the teaching staff. The teaching staff that are coming in aren't staying long enough to get the experience under their belt and then be able to deal with those issues. Not everybody has got a passion for SEN, which isn't helpful. And then we can't recruit the teaching assistants to support those students.
Yeah.
And some of those students we have got, because the special schools are full, have got really complex needs, and I mean really complex needs, that, you know, they may hit, they may kick, they may spit.
Yeah.
Who wants to go to work and deal with that on a daily basis? And you can quite understand why some staff don't want to work. And I know somebody will jump on this and go, but hold on, that's because the child's dysregulated. Yeah, we get that, but they're in a mainstream school and there's a limit to how much we can regulate in a mainstream school. So, yeah, it is a tricky one. I used to work in a school that was for severe and complex needs, and have seen some really quite difficult things that were tricky to watch. And I used to, for the staff, at the end of each day, the head would always debrief with them. And I think there's more and more of that coming in, where the resilience of staff is being looked at a lot more. And school senior leaders are working with the staff a lot more, because I think they've realised that when something like that's happened, it's that sort of bell curve of behaviour. It affects the staff as well. You know, you just that build up and then the peak of it, and then the it's happened, and then you've gone the come down. But it's not just the child that's gone through the behaviour, it's also the staff member that's dealt with that is also on that come down. When the adrenaline comes down and hits that low point, that can be quite affecting. And I think teachers or their senior leaders are jumping on that more now, and they're realising they need to nurture their staff a lot more in that sense. Absolutely. In safeguarding, you get containment. If you're an education psychologist, you get containment. That's our term for how we support staff. Yeah. But certainly as SENCOs and as teaching staff, we don't get that. There isn't a body that supports with that. But as you say, it is being recognised more. Yes. But not enough yet.
So what would you say is the most frustrating part about your job and the sector in general?
Paperwork.
Oh. I think that's echoed with all the teachers out there who are saying there's just so much to do.
Yeah, from a SENCO perspective, it's jumping through hoops and filling in paperwork. Yeah. And although none of it is legally required, local authorities tend to put those barriers in. They're almost like gates that you have to go through that slow you down so that they can catch up with what they're doing. But that doesn't help us. So you might end up triplicating information onto 3 different documents because people want it in a different format. It's like, why can't you just take my format?
Yeah,
please,
that's
just
so
take my Word document. Yeah.
And time wasting.
It's time wasting. And a lot of SENCOs, I kind of think they feel that they're probably overpaid admin staff sometimes, because they're sitting in an office or trying to sit in an office to fill in paperwork, and that's not what we went into the job for. I went in because I can roll my sleeves up, get on the floor and engage a child, not because I'm good at writing an essay on a form that gets a bit of extra funding.
Yeah. So it sounds here there could be some sort of a reform required for what's legally required and what's not, and let's just cut it out to save everyone some time. So how do you advocate for those policy changes, Abigail? Is that something that you are involved in?
No, but what we do is we tell the SENCOs what they are supposed to be doing and what they shouldn't be doing.
From a legal perspective.
Okay. So we work with a legal firm. They give free advice to our members. They do webinars for them and network sessions for them. And that doesn't cost the SENCOs anything. Yeah. They also do a part on our website with some advice in there as well. And they're always willing to dip into the Facebook group and answer some of those questions. So, there's a lot of myths that circulate around SEN, and trying to debunk some of those sometimes can be good fun. Yeah, definitely good fun.
Oh yeah, it keeps you on your toes, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, but it helps to reduce that bureaucracy.
Yes. But if you did get the call from number 10 and said we need an expert to come on board and help us, would you be interested?
Yeah, why not?
Let's go for it.
Oh yeah, I don't think they'd like me, but I think I might be on that hit list that they've written. Do not contact this person.
I think you could do a really good job. I'd want to move now on to looking at the expertise you have and your experience. There's been an increase in individuals who are being diagnosed with special educational needs and disabilities. What trends are you seeing, and why do you think it's happening?
Okay, so it's funny actually, we sometimes talk about it's in the water.
Oh.
And you see this wonderful cohort of children come through, and you'll hear teachers talk about, oh my goodness, year 3 this year, they're horrendous.
Yeah.
And you look across the country and everybody's saying year 3 is horrendous. It must be something in the water. I actually do think there's a bit of truth in that.
Okay.
So we've currently got children coming into primary schools who are the COVID kids. Mm-hmm. They were born during COVID. They didn't get the chance for socialisation. They have weak speech and language skills, possibly because not because parents didn't engage, but parents were working from home, and iPad and TV are fantastic babysitters.
Yes.
I use them with my own kids.
I don't, Abigail.
Oh. I do.
Of course you do. I think every parent does. If they're fortunate enough to have access to that, then it's essential.
They have to, because, we've still got a job to do. We need to earn the money to keep the house over the head. Yeah. So we've got to use those things. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's had an impact on speech and language. So you're seeing a lot of primary children coming through with speech and language needs. And then the other side of that is we're also getting better diagnoses. So we're recognising different needs in different ways. So if we go back about 4 years ago, it was autism in girls. That suddenly became something that everybody was more aware of and started to diagnose it more.
Started to remove the mask a little bit, enable them to see that there was actually something underlying.
Absolutely. Okay. So that one's gone up, and we're seeing that in the secondary schools. Yeah. Some schools are still identifying it as an SEMH rather than potential masked ASD. Okay. But, that's... as long as they're meeting the need, I don't mind what label they give it, to be perfectly honest. Just stick a baseball cap on it. Yeah. It doesn't matter as long as they meet the need. So those two are coming up. We're seeing a lot of parents who are now more aware and aware of the potential support that's available. Yes. So they're seeking private diagnoses. I have an opinion on private diagnoses, but I'll leave it for the moment. And I'm sure everybody will have seen the ADHD NHS debacle that went on a few weeks ago. There is a bit of an issue within the industry for that as well, for any needs that we're looking at where we're paying somebody to diagnose, because there is a bit of an incentive in there to give what we're looking for. Yeah. I'm pausing in my words there to make sure I pick the right ones. So we've got that coming in, but then you've also got parents that can't afford it. So we've got a bit of a disparity going on. We've got some that just can't afford to do that, and the schools are meeting those needs, but perhaps can't give everything they want, can't give everything that they need to those children. And are schools quite accepting of a private diagnosis? It doesn't matter whether the school accepts it or not, because the SEN code of practice has nothing to do with diagnosis. Okay. It's whether or not they have a need that needs to be addressed within school. It doesn't need a medical diagnosis for that need to be met. Okay. Interesting. So why are parents going to paying? Because when they move from post-16 education, so when they're 18, they want to move to university. Yeah. At that point, when they try to do their DLA applications, they prefer to have the diagnosis. Okay. So it's almost safeguarding for the future of the child. Okay. More and more adults are also getting diagnosed at a later stage in their life, and that must be tricky. There could be so many emotions involved in that. So for someone that's gone through the whole childhood masking, not understanding themselves, other people not understanding their behaviours, and then all of a sudden at a later in life you're diagnosed with an explanation as to why you may act in a certain way or behave in a certain way. What should we be doing? Because obviously if you're a child and you're diagnosed with a special educational need, you're going to grow up as an adult with a special educational need. It's not just going to disappear. So an autistic child is going to be an autistic adult. That's a fact. People that are diagnosed later in life, what should we be doing as a society, as a collective? What should we be doing to support them better? I haven't got a clue. I don't work with adults. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah. But I know a few people that have recently been diagnosed with something, and they've sort of gone, I'm not going to do anything differently because I've got this far in my life and I'm fine. And then I know other people that say, well, brilliant, now I know, then it means I can go and embrace this and embrace that. And I call it the hook to hang the troubles on. So sometimes you experience something and you don't know why you're feeling that way. Yeah. And then when you realise, it's because let's go for too much information here, my period's due. That's the reason why I'm feeling this way. That's why I had a headache yesterday, or whatever it is. That was the hook. I can hang that on, and I now understand it, and I feel better in myself.
Yes.
I think that's what's happening for a lot of adults. So some of them are accepting it, and they're now okay with it because they've got that hook. Others are frustrated that nobody noticed it earlier.
Okay.
And some of that, I think it goes back to what we were saying about resilience. You know, I'm a kid of the 1970s. You fell off your bike, you scraped your knee, you hid it underneath your trousers and hope your mum didn't notice when you got home.
Yeah.
You stayed out until the lights went off. We did things and we just got on with it.
Yeah.
We now have a society coming through where that's not necessarily the case.
Yes.
They expect other people to do things for them. And I think they're the ones that are finding it more difficult, perhaps.
Okay.
Because it's not they're not taking it on as it was me, it's everybody else.
So us as 1970s, 1980s children, we have to also almost put a mindset shift in place, don't we?
Yes.
To understand this new generation coming through.
Yes.
I'm working on it. I'm getting there. Yeah, I'm very much if your leg's not hanging off, get back and play hockey. What's wrong with you?
My kids fall over and I ask them whether they've left a dent in the floor.
Yeah. As long as their trousers are okay.
That's fine.
I think we're coming from the same angle here for sure. I want to move on to talking about inclusive education. It's quite a buzzword out there. And everyone's talking about the inclusive classroom and how every educator is striving to achieve inclusivity. Do you think we're there?
No. Nowhere near.
Okay.
Nowhere near.
What more needs to be done?
Stop putting the SEN kids in a separate building somewhere on the school site.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
That's not inclusive, is it?
No. Oh, they can be on our school roll, but we'll put them in a different building. That's not inclusive. Stop putting the TA at the side of them because that's kind of isolating them as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of saying, stop putting them all on one table because all you're doing is actually making that isolation room that was somewhere over there and plonking it in your classroom, but still isolating them. Those are three really simple things. Adapting things. We talk about adaptive teaching now. Differentiation is a swear word. It hasn't got 4 letters though, so but we're not allowed to use it. So adaptive teaching is the way forward. Okay. So it's not about dumbing things down. It's about there's no glass ceiling there. We can do this with everybody, but we need to approach it differently.
Okay.
So we need to scaffold it. We need to chunk it. We need the retrieval practice. We need all of those things in place to make sure somebody understands what's going on. And then there will always be a handful of children for whom a mainstream education is not appropriate.
Absolutely.
And I think as a society, at the moment, it's parental choice whether the child goes to a special school or a mainstream school.
Okay.
But I think as a society, and this is a controversial view of my own, that some of those children we need to be putting our foot down and actually going, we cannot meet their need in a mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's not because we want to exclude them, but they're not included when they are there.
Yeah.
They would be more included with their own tribe than they are in the mainstream.
So they could probably excel if they are with their own
Absolutely.
tribe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so more work to be done on that.
Lots.
Now, I know you only go back to the classroom when you need to backfill, but I bet you love it when you do go back to the roots. What strategies do you employ with your training and the work that you do to empower teachers and educators to better support the students with special needs?
I think my approach is very much humour. So I use Winnie the Pooh as my characters when I'm delivering training because I don't know the kids in their school. I don't know who it is that has ADHD or is dyslexic or whatever. So I use the characters from Winnie the Pooh and we use those. Everybody knows Tigger is ADHD, is your stereotypical ADHD. We go in there and we use those to talk about how do we meet Tigger's needs. So I have a great session on adaptive teaching where I'm actually delivering a lesson on volcanoes and all of a sudden Tigger starts taking off his shoes. And in my head, I'm thinking, why is Tigger taking off his shoes? And the others, people sit in the room and they're looking at me thinking, well, I don't really care why he's taking them off. I care. I want to know why he's taking off his shoes. And when we dive into it, there's a little story that sits behind it, which I won't share, just in case anybody wants to book my training. But there's a little story that sits behind it, and you suddenly realise that his decision to take his shoes off was a totally logical decision.
Right.
But it's just like if I picked up this now and decided to throw it at you.
Yeah.
What is my rationale? What's my decision behind it? Your reaction will be, you've just thrown a cactus at me, or a succulent. Not really sure what it is.
It's nice though.
It's very nice. Sorry for throwing you. You would just react to the fact I've just done something quite violent to you. My instinct is, why have you done that? What was your rationale behind it? What's your thinking behind it? And I think that is one of the most important things for educators. We are educating, but we need to educate ourselves as well. Yeah. And it's that relationships and behaviours side of things. Why has that child chosen to do that at that point in time? And it is a choice. And, everybody will say to me, no, Abigail, behaviour is not a choice. Actually, yes, it is a choice for me to pick that up and throw it. Yeah. But what drove that choice? And I think that's where we need to go next.
Abigail, how important do you feel the teacher-teaching assistant relationship is in a special educational needs school, a special educational needs classroom? Is it just a paperwork nightmare for teachers, or is this something that should be quite a natural process that they go through on a daily basis?
It should be natural.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be on paper. So I teach teaching assistants at the moment. That's, I never managed to get out of teaching, so I teach teaching assistants.
Yeah.
And we look at their role within it, them taking some responsibility, actually going and finding what the curriculum is for this term, and knowing what's coming up in the next lesson is their responsibility. Knowing who the teacher wants them to work with and what specific tasks they want them to do is the teacher's side of it. And the teacher needs to communicate that. Does it need to be a paperwork exercise? No, it can be a post-it note. It can be a quick email. It can be a chat as they go through the door. But it's more about knowing what the curriculum is, where we're starting from, where we are now, and where we're headed towards. Yeah. That's the most important bit.
So having that shared goal, everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, and everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And it doesn't take a lot of time. And we don't have a lot of time. The teachers and TAs, certainly in a secondary school, the TAs are kind of running into the room with the kids and then running back out with them at the end to get to the other side of school. Yeah. So there isn't that time to share lots of information. But everybody uses SharePoint or OneDrive or Google Drives now, and that's where the information is stored. They can go and find that curriculum map and they can pull it off. Part of the teacher workload a few years ago was that teachers do not need to write lesson plans anymore. Okay. I'm old-fashioned. I still write a lesson plan, so it has my details on it. It'll tell the TA what they're doing. I think that is where we had that paperwork issue. Right. Because we were generating paperwork for the sake of generating a piece of paper. And although that did give the TA a bit more guidance, and they could perhaps ask for a week in advance of what they were doing, it didn't necessarily mean they did their job better. Okay, so it's giving the TAs more autonomy in their role as well. And with that ties in with the resilience. And are any of them, I suppose we're probably generalising a little bit by asking this question, but are any of them reluctant to go and find out what the curriculum is and what they should be doing? Or do they say it's not their job? Do you get that? Sometimes you get that, but actually, once they realise that the autonomy, that ability to have advocacy for themselves, to say, actually, hold on a minute, you're teaching photosynthesis and I don't know what photosynthesis is. I need to make sure I know that before I come to the lesson. Okay. Rather than walking in and suddenly have all these words thrown at you where you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to support them and I don't know what that word means. That's really empowering for the TAs, I think. And especially if they've got to produce resources for something. Mm-hmm. We don't find TAs producing lots of resources now. So Twinkle must do amazing business because I think most of it gets pulled off there these days. They'll pull them off, they'll use those, but we don't see lots of TAs creating laminated cards and bits and pieces like that. Okay. We've moved away from it. It's very much the human reacting to things. So it's not a pre-prepared piece of paper or resource.
Okay.
It's a human that's actually responding to, you didn't quite understand photosynthesis, let's do it this way. Let's grab a mini whiteboard and write it down on there.
Okay.
You could never replace that.
I wonder if this is to do with the cohort of people that are now in that teaching assistant type of position. They're older. So the age group now are, the majority age group who are teaching assistants are between age 40 and 59, whereas previously it was more sort of 30 to 45. Have you seen that shift in your work and throughout your career?
I find them at two ends. So when I started teaching assistants were, I call them paint pot teaching assistants, which is a really horrible phrase, but they were the ladies that used to come in. They were parents or grandmas who used to come in on a Friday afternoon to wash out the paint pots and listen to a couple of kids read.
Yeah.
That cohort has gone.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a professional role.
Yes.
But there are two camps of TAs. I'm going to say 99% of them belong in that professional box, if you like. And then we've got the 1% who see it as, this is a term time only job that I only have to do from 9 till 3. I've got nothing to do outside of it. I'm just going to walk through the door, do what I'm told to do and walk back out again.
Okay. It's a job.
It's a job that pays something.
Okay. Yeah, and that is really interesting. I was just wondering what that shift was about, and I think that does probably explain quite a lot of that. We had something that happened in 2020, which was obviously, it rocked the world. We couldn't escape from it, and it was COVID. How do you feel it's affected the SEND sector?
I think we missed a massive opportunity during COVID because we were told we could suspend the curriculum, and we did temporarily, and then we were told we had to put it back in place. And we suspended exams, and we found a different way of doing exams and all the rest of it. And then, for whatever reason, we have gone back to our good old Victorian values of putting kids back in classrooms 100% of the time, delivering a traditional curriculum, and back to traditional exams.
Okay.
We missed the opportunity to do a massive overhaul of the education system. And the reason I think that has a big impact for our SEN children, some of the children with autism who were really struggling to attend school and be in lessons engaged so much better with that online learning.
So it was a positive thing for a lot of SEND children.
Absolutely. And, we had that interim period in 2021-ish where we had some lessons going on in school with the camera on and, other children were sitting at home, and it was a bit of a 50-50. For those kids who struggled with anxiety to struggle to come to school, it was amazing because they could still access that learning. Now, I spoke to a school last week, they've got 60% of their staff off with COVID. They were desperate to close the school, but were facing a bit of parental opposition, which you can understand. But they weren't allowed to do the online stuff again. It was like, we've got to be live or it's nothing. No, come on, we found something that worked. How many of us now go to a face-to-face meeting?
Yes.
Most of my meetings I hold online. Yeah. I don't do a face-to-face anymore. It saves so much of my time.
You're so much more productive because you can have these meetings.
Absolutely. I can fit 3 in a day rather than 1 and a load of travelling.
Yeah.
But we missed that opportunity with education. We could have done the same thing. So what we ended up doing is our SEN children came back in. Some of them still haven't gone back to school.
Okay.
So the anxiety that sits with that, a lot of our autistic children have struggled to settle back in.
Okay.
And I think if you speak to a lot of schools, they'll tell you that behaviour has plummeted since we've gone back.
Really?
Again, I think it's that resilience. So, when we're at home, we're doing the online learning. If you want to nip for a wee break, you haven't got to put your hand up and wait.
Yeah.
Or if you want a drink, or if you need to go for a 5-minute wander, or you want to stand up rather than sitting down, you can do those things. But in a classroom where the teacher's got their eyes on you, you can't do them. And a lot of our students are really, really struggling.
So what's the answer? We've proven that it can work as online, but then you've also got the resistance from people that say it's not the right thing. They should be in a school environment and learning discipline and being in that structured environment. it's difficult.
It is difficult. I mean, I agree that we need a structured environment. They need the socialisation. That was a bit that was missing from online.
Yeah.
They need that socialisation. But I think we could strike a balance between the two. And for those children, it goes back to, I'm a SENCO, special educational needs. I need to coordinate provision for them. What is the most appropriate provision to meet their need?
Yeah.
And if that most appropriate provision is for them to sit on a computer and watch me from their bedroom deliver a lesson, that's the most appropriate provision. It shouldn't be, no, you've got to come into school.
Yeah. So again, more work to be done on that.
No solution apart from another pandemic and we get another choice.
Exactly. So good and bad. Yeah. Okay. But with that, with COVID, we probably couldn't have coped as well had we not had the technological advances that we do have. And I think for children, young people that do have SEND, the technological advances are life-changing in so many ways. You look at sort of, I guess, the eye gaze, scanning pens, all that sort of stuff that is just amazing. What would you consider to be the key revelationary piece of tech that's out there?
I think AI.
Yeah, yes.
The husband will kill me for saying it, but
he's not a fan, is he?
So AI, November last year, I was one of the early onboarders, kind of getting in there. I think not only does it support students, but it's also actually a game changer for teachers as well. So just being able to go to something free like ChatGPT and put in there what is photosynthesis and get a summarised answer, but actually explain photosynthesis for a 5-year-old. So if you've got a 13-year-old who's trying to learn about it, but their vocabulary is that of a 5-year-old, put that in there and you've got an answer. In language they understand. If you've got EAL students, of course my EAL hat coming on from it, but EAL students, put that in there and put what is photosynthesis, explain it for a 5-year-old in Polish, and it will do that. And they can then read it, because if you translate it for our age group or 13-year-olds, you'll get the complex words. Well, there's no point doing that because they're not going to pick it up.
I think for photosynthesis, I would need the 4 or 5-year-olds as well, to be perfectly honest with you. I might try.
You type it in later. But it gives them that. Even something as simple as the child, you use their normal Word document, they can type something in, or use your speech to text to put something in there. I'm a massive fan of assistive technology. So using that, use the microphone in Word and get the information down, but then picking that up, copying and pasting it, dropping in ChatGPT and saying, please, can you spell check this? Or please, can you grammar check it? Does this make sense? I think it's amazing for our students. I think any school that is scared of it needs to look at the calculator that they use on their phone probably quite regularly, or the one that they've got in their classroom, and go, 1970s, we were saying the same thing. We'll still be using slide rules. This will never take on. Well, how many of us have ever used a slide rule?
It's an opportunity to enhance knowledge, isn't it? And make it more age appropriate.
Yeah, we've got to use it.
And it's that shift to bespoking things to the way that each individual child learns that we're all really keen to ensure we get to at some point. So AI, positive.
AI is positive, but also for the teachers. So we talk about teacher wellbeing and teachers not having time to do things. If a teacher is thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to teach this lesson tomorrow and I'm not sure how to adapt it for Tigger. Maybe we're doing the volcanoes lesson again. How can I adapt that lesson? All you've got to do is type it in there. How can I adapt this lesson for Tigger who has ADHD? And it will give you a set of strategies.
It's amazing. And
it's like having a SENCO on tap.
Yeah, exactly. It might reduce your workload.
Maybe.
I can see it reducing a lot of anxiety for children that don't necessarily have special educational needs as well. Those that are quite reluctant to put things on paper and show people to check. I know my daughter doesn't really give me any work to check, whereas I'm sure if she was to go into something that was on technology, she'd be a lot more on board with that. So I think it's a really positive thing. So when you're in schools, Abigail, do you advocate and how do you do this? Ensure that the children's voices are heard and then implemented into initiatives within the school?
So when I go in to do an SEN health check, which is what we call a review, or an SEN inspection if you prefer, but we like health check. When we go in to do that, one of the sections that we look at is parent voice, pupil voice and staff voice, so that we know that what the SENCO is telling us and what the SLT is telling us and what the governors are telling us is also the same thing that the others are telling us. And then we write that up into the report and go, well, actually, you're saying that you send a TA to every English lesson. The English department didn't say that, and the kids say they haven't seen one since September or whenever it was. So we pick that up. We talk to children about what they would like to see change. So I was in a school recently, and there was a young lady who had come out of her lessons. She was very dysregulated. She wasn't ready to go back in again. I desperately needed to go and do a tour of the school, and there was nobody to look after her whilst I needed to go and do this tour, because the SENCO needed to go with me. So we invited her along, and
brilliant.
Yeah, it was great, because I just turned to her and went, right, go and show me the classrooms where things don't work. It was brilliant, because she just took me to every class she hated and told me why she hated it.
Yeah,
the
that's
SENCO got so much information from it about, oh my goodness, the displays are overwhelming, or it's too noisy in here, the fluorescent lights are buzzing and annoying her, or flickering or something. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and it can be just something so tiny, like
something
a
so tiny
light, that can be such a big deal and a real barrier to some children.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what a great exercise. You got so much from it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as SENCOs, we have to think out of the box all of the time. But next time that SENCO has got a dysregulated child, instead of just sitting there in his office trying to work and not being able to work because they're screaming and shouting and throwing things, he might well just go for a walk with them and go, come on then, show me what works, show me what doesn't work, and go and do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. What do you think are the key qualities for someone to work in education, and particularly in special education?
Back to resilience again.
Yeah.
It has to be. You've got to have a thick skin. You've got to have the duck's feathers, because a lot of it has got to wash over you.
So can anyone do it? Anyone with any background, from any industry sector, as long as they're resilient, they could work in special education?
You have to like children as well.
Key, yeah.
Within reason, I believe so. Yeah, if you've got the right kind of attitude for it, attitude. Sorry, not aptitude. You need to be somebody who wants to work with those children. You need to be somebody who's prepared to take the bashes.
Yeah.
You need to be somebody who isn't expecting an overnight success, that you're happy with the little steps.
Yeah.
And that can be really frustrating for some people, because they'll pour their heart and soul into a fantastic volcanoes lesson, and then not make any progress with that child, and they'll come away from it feeling deflated. You cannot have that. You've got to be, didn't quite make it that day. Let's see how we do tomorrow. Let's do earthquakes.
The smaller, what we would consider to be tiny milestones are massive to some people. So and having that patience. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so patience and resilience.
Liking kids.
Liking kids. Important.
Resilience, liking kids. Just probably an attitude of, I can do this.
Okay.
Because you cannot think you can't do it.
Okay.
You've got to have that mindset of,
so you've got to have self-belief.
Yeah. And I think also somebody who is prepared to back down.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking back to that school again. A lot of staff get into conflict with children because they believe they're the superior, and they won't back down on something. Got to have the last word, or they've got to be right. I'm fine with that. I'm like, okay, I'll come back to this in 10 minutes and walk away and calm myself, rather than rising to that argument.
I think it's a skill that people could use in everyday life.
Any industry.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's exclusive to education, is it?
No, not at all.
I think that, yes.
But I think if you're going to work with SEN kids, you've got to be willing to back down and let them win.
Yeah, definitely. So how can we encourage more people with those key characteristics that we've just mentioned? How can we encourage more people to start working in our sector? Because we need them to.
Shall we tell them about the school holidays? No, we don't get them.
Teachers have to work through school holidays.
We do work through school holidays, and we work through the term time. It isn't a 9 till 5 job.
No.
With 26 days holiday. It is something that will consume your life, is probably the best way of describing it. You'll be on holiday on a beach in Spain somewhere and see a shell and think, that would be perfect for that lesson on whatever. You're still doing it even when you're on holiday.
Yes.
How do you encourage people? I think go and volunteer. One of the best ways of finding out about schools is to volunteer as a governor.
Okay.
So if you're somebody who's thinking, is this something I want to go and do, but I can't afford to drop my job to go and find out, go and be a governor, because the meetings are generally in the evening.
Okay.
If you are a governor, your employer should give you time off to do governor's duties, so you get to go into a school during the day to go and visit it and find out.
Yeah.
But you get to find out a bit about the sector. You get to find out that the data that we have to work with and the different jobs that sit within there. Some people will be suited to teaching, some will be suited to a TA role, some will be more suited to a business role within education. I mean, we have school business managers. It quite helps if they like children as well, because they are based in a school. Getting anybody like that, even if you want to go and be a caretaker in the school, we desperately need caretakers, by the way. But if you want to go and do that, volunteer to be a governor, because I think you get a different perspective on it.
So seeing that behind the scenes
See
view.
behind the scenes.
Okay, that is really, really informative. Thank you, Abigail. That brings me to the end of my questioning, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I feel like I've absorbed so much knowledge myself from what you were saying, so I really appreciate that. And thank you for taking part.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.